Hi, it's Burr Stewart, and welcome to the next episode in my series of model railroad operations videos. We were having an operating session in the basement, number 51, we call it. And a lot of stuff was going on. So this is the highlights from that session, and it has both some meets, some switching, bang, of a way freight that's called the Oiler, which you see here operating in Delta Yard. And along with running trains and switching, we got a few bangs in. Bang! So let's get started. In the beginning, we were making up some trains in Seattle's Interbay Yard. Here in Northern Pacific Gondola, bangs into a tank car, but it wasn't lined properly. I like to show you that coupling is not always as easy as it looks. Bang! So that was 2 tries, so he came in with a stick, lined up the couplers just like you would if you were a prototype brakeman. Bang! There we go. And now we've got the thing going. But he was just dropping off that one gondola car, so he uncoupled it on the other side with his little pick and pulled away with the rest of his cut. A couple minutes later, he came on another track to a different tank car. Suppose this one will work? Bang! Oh, very nice. First try is a charm. Now pay no attention to that Great Northern car there that looks so shiny and plastic. I'm going to have to weather that. It's just driving me crazy every time I look at it. Why I allowed that on the railroad, I don't know. Anyway, what train is that?
I don't know.
It's the transfer train.
It's whatever came in.
That's right. He's breaking down this train that was recently transferred from the Stacy Yard in South Seattle into the Interbay Yard in North Seattle. Now he's going to uncouple that transfer caboose and put these other cars in the tracks where they belong. Notice we put a squealer here in the throat of Interbay Yard, so we get to enjoy that squealing sound. Here's a close-up of that uncoupling. Yeah, nice. A little later on, our SD7 was picking up some different cars. And we'll see how he did here. Bang! Another good one, it looks like. I thought I'd just give you a shot of the yard here while he was fooling around with it. Yeah. I can't remember which cut this was. Oh, it's going with a Boeing car. It's probably a transfer over to the Everett, one of the Everett yards. Probably the Everett Bayside yard. And I know that because the Boeing 747 car would have gone to the 747 factory up in the Boeing Everett plant, which is handled on a train out of Bayside, which we call the jet job. There are videos on that on this channel if you look for them. So meanwhile, Brian Elchlepp had brought over a couple of his engines just to show off. Listen to the sounds and sights of this. Got the headlight on, dimmed it. Rotating beacon. You just dimmed it.
Yeah.
Horn. There's the headlight on bright again. Doesn't that sound good? That's what you can do when you really work on a locomotive and put in good speakers and decoders. We don't care what we're doing in operations. If he has engines like this to show off, well, we just stop everything and watch them and listen to them.
Maybe not all the way up.
Wow. We really do need some fence around that livestock, don't we? I know some of you have commented on that, and we'll get to it eventually, I promise. Now, this is just a quick shot of the SW10 of the Union Pacific, which Brian's been working on, and I'll be running that here in a while. And look at the details. He's got the Interbay stenciled in there. That engine was based in Interbay. So with the operating session well underway, I took a look around me, and all of a sudden I saw that we had three different trains in one view. So on the top there, we have the GWS, Great Northern Western Pacific to Santa Fe, running through the town of Burlington on its way south to California. In the middle, we have the unit coal train moving north from Portland, Oregon up to Vancouver. And then in the foreground, we have a switcher in the Stacy Street yard classifying some cars. We call it classifying. The railroaders, I don't think they use that term. They just say sorting. And you can see with a Milwaukee caboose on the end that he was working with a transfer that had come in from the Milwaukee Road. But what I was really interested in was this new GP10, which I showed you in a couple of earlier videos, which was now at the head end of this nice consist. Now, this GWS train had some pickups to do in Burlington. Well, just one really, and had to set out 3 cars and pick up 2 cars. So it was switching into the yard here. You see the lead engines preparing to back up and pick up their cars. While down on the lower level, what would become the motive power for a different train was coming out of the Argo yard in South Seattle and moving up to the engine terminal in North Seattle, which we call Interbay. And down below, you can see the switch engine had dropped some cars off and was moving its way through the yard ladder. And up on Burlington, bang! Our GWS train had picked up these 2 cars in Burlington after setting off the 3 cars behind it there, and it was now backing all the way back to pick up the rest of its train. In an ideal world, he would have pulled that back end of his train up to be near this switch instead of having to back all the way down to pick it up.
Where's your train? Right here. Ah, okay.
But it's not always the ideal world, is it? But this Athearn SW1500 is one of the best engines that I've ever had the pleasure of operating. Very nice job on this. And see, there's some crew members sitting out there on a log that former railroaders told me actually existed on the real railroad. A few minutes later, Scott was bringing a train across Royal Brougham, a Milwaukee transfer from Black River Junction, while Bill had finished working Burlington and was bringing the GWS southbound. They were trying to pass each other in the aisle, and I didn't get a picture.
Get a picture of this,
but it was pretty funny, as you see. Now, a few minutes later, the GWS train met the unit coal train, which you saw earlier, in Everett's Bayside yard. And this is the only chance you'll see of the motive power on the unit coal train, 3 F-45s.
So, clears the turn as he clears.
Nice. This long coal train is holding on the main line while it waits for the GWS train to clear in the siding. Down at the other end of the coal train, the GWS is now pulled up to the very end of the siding.
Got one.
And hopefully it'll be just enough that the coal train can pull by. Both of these trains were just a little bit too long for this siding, but they were able to squeeze it by somehow. You can hear them discussing it.
I think so. I hope I am.
That's it, yeah.
So you can't really go much further.
No, yeah, it's real tight.
Oh, it just worked.
Real tight on both ends.
Just barely fit,
Hope he's
and I just wanted you to enjoy the engines on the front of that GWS train.
Yeah. That is a brass wheel.
Right.
That's a nice unit coal train. Now let's go look at what was happening on the other end. It was just continuing north from the Columbia River in Portland all the way up to the export coal facilities in lower mainland of British Columbia.
C646?
I was trying not to take too much video, but what can you do when a C636 comes by? Or two?
That's crazy.
I mean, seriously. Now this is GP10 number 1421, still heading up the GWS train, and now meeting the SWG. So meanwhile, Colin was running the local train called the Oiler. And if you're not familiar with the Oiler, it was a local train that ran from Interbay Yard up to the Everett complex, and sometimes beyond, but mainly just back and forth from Seattle to Everett, switching all the various oil loading and unloading docks that were located in places like Richmond Beach, Edmonds, and Mukilteo. Bang! These Department of Defense silver cars were carrying fuel to go to the SR-71, which is a very celebrated spy plane that operated out of Air Force bases in the Pacific Northwest. So this is a realistic load for us to be running. And right now, the Oiler has made it all the way from Seattle up to the Delta Yard in Everett. And he's basically picking up some cars that need to be taken down to Seattle, and he'll be running through the Delta Y and back into the Bayside Yard, which is on the other side of this peninsula. What he's doing now that he's picked up these cars is he's backing onto his caboose. Now we're all in a learning mode here of how to do switching efficiently. And of course it would have been smart to have dropped the caboose closer up to that turnout instead of having to back all the way back here to the caboose. But on the other hand, it gives us some time to just enjoy a little switching. I personally am always a sucker for flat cars. I don't know why. Their lack of anything on top just makes it interesting to me. Here we go. Bang! It didn't quite couple because I haven't lubricated the couplers on this brass caboose. So I just shoved it on there so he wouldn't have to go back and forth. This is called reality model railroading. When we do things that aren't as realistic as they should be, but we want to keep the fun and the action moving, so we do it. So, in theory, he would just run over to Bayside Yard. But in practice, if you look in the distance, you can see there's a train occupying the main line on the other side of the Delta Y. See that? So he couldn't really go to Bayside. He had to wait. He's basically sitting here waiting while that other train does some switching in Bayside. And this is another thing that is very typical of railroading, is you can't always do exactly what you want to do when you want to do it because there's a train in the way. Makes it all fun. As long as you don't have to wait too long. Here's a view of that train. It's pulling up the main line past the Delta Y. Now, this train was the SWG train, which stands for Santa Fe, Western Pacific, and Great Northern. So it was heading north from California. It had just been doing some switching in the Bayside yard in Everett, and now it was heading up to Burlington and Bellingham before reaching its final destination. Now, once they were clear, now we can demonstrate how the Y works. This meant that Colin could bring his oiler train into the Bayside yard. And you can see it pushed that switch, the push button, and that lined the turnout, as we call it.
And once I clear it, should I reset it to black?
Or the switch points. And now he was coming into the tunnel, and on the other side of that tunnel is the Bayside yard. My friend Eric Van Nice got the clever idea of putting a little hole in that rock wall so we could see the position of the switch points and confirm that everything was working the way it should.
There's a whole bunch of Burlington cars.
So as you see here, our train finally got out of Delta and is heading over to Bayside.
A lot of squealing going on down.
Yes, isn't that nice? Another example of reality model railroading is that caboose had been repainted by 1973, but we run it in its original paint. That's what we do.
That's right, good cars out.
Here's something. Now, meanwhile, the Burr notwithstanding, the SWG train, SWG, was making its way up to the Mount Vernon station. I couldn't resist letting you see this. The women that were running this train had an absolutely great time, and they got a lot of help from the veteran operators that were also here. Everyone had a good time. Look at that consist. That's a typical 1973 Burlington Northern consist. We call it the Rainbow Era, and you can see why. So meanwhile, Colin had proceeded down from Bayside to Mukilteo, which is one of the places where he had up. Bang! A lot of work to do. Bang! And so he was fussing around with the cars that were supposed to be put in the team track. And here was another reality model railroading and real railroading situation where there's only really room for 2 cars in the team track, but at this particular time we had 4 cars that were supposed to be spotted at the team track. So he left those 2 green box cars in the milepost yard in a condition called off spot, meaning that they were not spotted where they were supposed to be, but they were right near where they were supposed to be, so that the very next switcher that came by would be able to remove the cars that were in the spot and then place the next ones in. So a minute later, he was putting his whole train together, having left those off-spot cars and having picked up some of these silver DOD tank cars. And now he's backing onto his caboose, and he's going to be able to make the final run into Interbay yard.
Get rid of firemen on Santa Fe.
I'm planning to put one more switch right in this spot so that we can have an additional oil terminal to load, because this oiler needs a little bit more work than we provide it right now on the layout.
And that was all political in California. Lower grocery prices. Get rid of this feather bedding job.
Bang. There's another case where I had to shove the caboose on to help him out.
Thank you.
Like I said before, this is reality model railroading. The couplers need to be lubricated, and that boxcar really needs to be weathered.
And they actually had a boiler that they had to operate.
Yeah, shovel coal or inject the oil into oil in the Santa Fe space.
Oh, so they needed somebody.
They needed somebody, yes.
So now we're coming into Ballard with our little oiler train, and we're going to be able to tie it up in Interbay. Not to go off on too much of a tangent, but that road really needs a white stripe down the middle of it. We've all been looking at that now for several years, and the painting crew just doesn't get to it. Oh well. So that's the Ballard station there, as you know, if you've been watching this channel. And if you haven't been watching this channel, I recommend going back to some of the archives and looking at all the various operating sessions that we've chronicled, along with many other things, how-to videos and different things, prototype trains. In this case, we're running our HO scale train across the bridge number 4 at the Ballard Locks, the ship canal. And down below is the new West Seattle area that we've been modeling, with the Seattle skyline in the background there. And up above is the Bellingham staging area. So a few minutes later, we pulled into Interbay. And the last thing he had to do after dropping his train was to bring his engine over into the engine track. So you see he just came to a stop there. And you can see his old NP caboose there and the cut of cars that he brought in there on the track 1 there in Interbay. Of course, Scott will do some switching with that engine, and then we'll be good to go. So I hope you enjoyed this recap of an operating session on the Burlington Northern, and you'll take a look at some of the other videos on my channel. And for now, this is Burr Stewart, wishing you much fun with trains.
For a couple months.
You did everything.
All right, let's see. I've got all that way down to the ice house, and then I've got to stop.